Salakya Chaksurun Minitam Yanatashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati So Parantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakam Sri Chaitanya Manobish Vaishnavam Shah Sri Rupam Sagaditam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Samsadevam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivishikan Vitam Stam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kata Radhakanta Damostute Jayatam Sharito Pango Mama Maner Matergati Matsavasha Param Bhoja Radhan Madana Mohanam Sriman Rasarasaram Bhivam Sivan Karsan Venushanu Guri Gopinate Suyesanam Divyad Vendaranya Kapadrumada Srimad Ratnagara Shima Sanasto Shri Sri Radha Shilagobana Prestadavi Seva Manushmanami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govinaya Namo Namaha Mangalang Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guru Radhaja Mangalam Maratirana Mangalayana Nururi Tapti Kanjana Gaurangi Radha Vindavaneshwari Vishavanu Sute Devi Pranamani Hari Priye Om Aganati Mananda Syangarangana Saraka Chaksurin Militam Yana Tashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparadikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paritana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Ladita Shivishikan Vitam Shah Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamanaste Sarasati Deva Guruvani Patan Nirvishesa Sanivadi Praskada Desana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Welcome to Transcendental Tuesday. Rob on Zoom, Brent on Facebook Live, and Chad Wheelwright. Chad's in Italy, I think, right now. I have a software program for the treadmill that takes me on walks in different parts of the world. And I have to say, Italy is practically my favorite country to go for a walk around Lake Como, for instance, or in the Venice area. What a beautiful country. And again, our point, which we come back to over and over again, is there's so much beauty in this material world, then just imagine the beauty of the spiritual world. And if all beauty everywhere in the material and the spiritual world originates in the transcendental Yam Shayam Sundara Chintarupam, in the threefold bending form of Krishna, just imagine how amazing is the form of Krishna. We're going to talk a little bit more about that this morning. But Chad, enjoy your time in Italy. Sundari Priya is there also, as well as Carmen. Bring you up to date. We had a visit yesterday from my old friend Peter. Peter was with the original Vaikuntha Players, the dramatic troupe, which performed for Prabhupada. I don't think he was in it at that time exactly, but he came on board later and performed with Sankirtan and Lokamanga and many Prajapati, many of the legends of ISKCON theater. He's been living in British Columbia, a rural community called Saranagati. And he and his wife are on vacation, so they thought they'd take in the parks in Utah, Moab, Zions, and Bryce. And the last time he was in Utah, we just had this little cabin in which I'm here today in the basement, sharing this program with you. He hadn't seen neither the Spanish Fork Temple nor the Salt Lake City Temple. On the way to Spanish Fork, stopped off at Salt Lake City Temple. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it when he came here. He told me how shocked he was. And I've seen that in a lot of people, those who have not seen the various stages of evolution here, but who had not been back since the cabin days from 87 up until this building opened in 2001, or are just shocked at the propulsion forward, at the what has manifested here by Krishna's mercy. In any case, he and his wife, who's from Europe, from Siberia, actually, she was born in Siberia. We had a nice lunch and we reminisced about the old days. And he's going to be coming back here on the weekend. So for those of you who are in Utah, he'll be performing. I don't know if I resonate with the title. It's called The Lake of Death, but it sounds kind of a morbid title. But he'll be doing a dramatic recitation, both in Spanish Fork on Sunday and in Salt Lake City on Saturday night, of what he calls the Lake of Death, which is really just the part in the Mahabharata where Yudhishthira goes to drink water, and his brothers have preceded him. They were warned not to drink water by a heron standing in the middle of the lake. They ignored the advice of the heron, drank water, and lost consciousness. And Yudhishthira came by, and it's a wonderful conversation between Yudhishthira and the heron, who turns out to be none other than his father Yamaraj. So Peter will be here to do that. He also leads a very nice kirtan. If you're within driving distance of the temple here in Spanish Fork or in Salt Lake City, come there on Saturday, or come in Spanish Fork on Sunday, or attend both if you like. Peter's he's not initiated. His wife is initiated, but he's very much a ISKCON man and an extremely talented actor and dramatist. It was good to connect with him, and it's even more good, if that's a proper grammatical term, to think of reconnecting with him on the weekend. Resuming from where we left off, and thanks for joining us, Govinda Dev and Shali, and bye, Bobby. I hope you heard that last bit, Shali, about Peter being in both temples this coming weekend. If you're able to come up from Ephraim, I think you'll enjoy the dramatic presentation. Just be short. It won't prolong the duration of the program unduly, but it'll be easily worth the extra 10 minutes that we spend to introduce Peter and have him do his Lake of Death dramatic presentation. That title might be a little much, but anyway. Yesterday, we finished by quoting two poems from one of my favorite poems, William Blake. And he's not just my favorite poet. He is, I read somewhere that his poem, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright, is over the ages, over the several hundred years since it was penned, has been the most popular poem in the English language. And it talks about the sovereignty of God. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry, and what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could frame the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, and what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare thy deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? I love the way that from the first verse, what immortal hand or eye could frame, to the last verse, that change of that single word from could to dare. And that's what the poet is doing. He's daring you to challenge God. He's daring you to question God. You challenge God, the supreme creator, the origin of all worlds, material and spiritual, he who sees past, present, and future. You challenge him because you think you know how things should work out better than him. We're like little 3-year-old kids. We don't even know what's good for us. We think we know what's good for us. 3-year-old kid thinks that what's good for him is to eat only ice cream, never eat fruits or vegetables or grains, just eats ice cream. We experience this all the time with the parrots that we have. They have the mentality of a 3-year-old. It's equivalent to the 3-year-old mentality of a child. And they have no idea of how to choose healthy food from amongst an array of availabilities. They'll always go for sweet or salty. We had one African gray parrot, Jai. He was kindly donated by Abhijit Das Gupta, and we had him for 25 years. But we couldn't make him eat healthy food. He would not eat fruits and vegetables, and he would not eat the pretty boy pellets, which are healthy for you as well. We'd try sometimes to only offer him the option of the healthy foods and to keep away anything salty, anything sweet, but then he just wouldn't eat. He literally would refuse to eat for several days at a time. I believe he would have starved himself to death rather than to eat healthy food. And he was such a sweet bird, extremely devoted to me. And he should have lived a lot longer. African grays can live 50, 60 years, but he passed away at 25. And I surmise that it was because he never ate healthy food. We're like the bird or like the 3-year-old. We think we know what's good for us, because it tastes good. It has to be good for us. But the problem is you're just eating sugar all the time. That'll lead to a lot of health problems and premature death. Fact is, we don't know what's good for us. The father knows what's good for the child, much better than the child. The child may not like what the father proposes. The child may not like the options that the father offers, but the child needs to learn to trust the choices of the father, to trust the directions of the father. The father has the child's best interest at heart more than the child himself or herself. The best course of action for a child is not to insist on getting his own way, but to trust what it is that the father suggests or puts before him. This poem, I love it, Tiger, Tiger. The God who created the tiger is not to be questioned, ladies and gentlemen. He's not to be questioned. Devotees brought me back to Australia in 2012. It was the 40th anniversary of the installation of the Radha Gopinath deities there. It was a joyous occasion. I met many devotees that I hadn't seen for, 35 years. And it was just like we hadn't been apart. It's just the thickness, the sweetness, the closeness that you develop when you're a young person. You've got the messianic spirit. You're living in a van, traveling, crisscrossing the country, doing book distribution for 8 or 10 hours a day. You get extremely close. You get bonded to your devotees. And that bond we have one to another, devotees that in the beginning 70 to 75 in Australia, is the strongest bond that two living beings can have. Even in marriage, the secret of a successful marriage is let the husband and wife serve together. If they're serving each other's senses, it's bound to break up. It's bound to dissolve. As soon as one party ceases to satisfy the senses of another one, then that person is looking abroad for another partner to take up where the other one could no longer go. Oops. Relationships based on personal, egotistical sense gratification are doomed. That's why 41% of all marriages in America end in divorce. Other countries actually have a higher divorce rate. And of the ones that stay together, many of them are loveless marriages because everyone seeks for their own stimulation, their own sense gratification. The secret to a successful marriage, Vaibhav and I have been married for 53 years. We serve together side by side. We're soldiers. We're Chaitanya's army. And that service is what binds two people together over the long course of time, over the course of an entire lifetime. We're serving not ourselves, but we're serving Krishna. We're serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The property in Spanish Fork is worth a lot, obviously. Everything's paid for. And we don't own anything. We don't have a penny to our name. We don't have anything deeded to ourselves. We don't even have like a health plan or insurance. We don't have a will, which we probably should. How who to pass on the responsibility of this project, who's going to manage it after we go. That's one glaring omission. But nevertheless, we get more pleasure from spending resources, spending income, spending donations to improve the property, to beautify the property, to enhance the facilities. When we see someone walk in the door with a face which expresses amazement, astonishment, that thrills me right down to my tippy toes. I get goosebumps. There's nothing I could do for myself. There's no way I could spend money on food or vacations or travel or a fancy car, big mansion-like house. There's no way I could spend money on myself that would give as much pleasure as I get from seeing people come and wander around the property, enjoy it, bring their kids. The thing I like the most is about a year ago, I put a swing out underneath the tree by the pond, a swing and a rocking chair. So you can sit there and you can look on your right-hand side, you can look down to the bowl, the amphitheater where we have our performing arts. You can look straight ahead and see the temple from east to west. You can look to the left, the 200,000 gallon lake is right there with the lily pads and the fountain and the Shiva statue up on top. And you're under the shade of the tree, so you're not directly exposed to the sunlight, the high desert sunlight. I love it when I see people just sitting there chilling, taking a break from the stress of the material world, rocking, either by themselves or with their spouse or a few family members. A couple of weeks ago, there was a whole Spanish grandchildren, grandparents, parents, and they just made themselves at home out there. They bought some buffets and they took the plates out there and they sat in the grass and they sat on the swing. They were there for a couple of hours, and there's nothing I could do for myself that would give me as much pleasure as seeing people enjoy the facility of this temple. So God is sovereign. So anyway, I mentioned that, I don't know how I got off onto that, but I went to Australia in 2012. And we had a great reunion. It was wonderful to reconnect with all those devotees who had given their youth in Prabhupada's movement. And they asked me to give a couple of classes as well. So I gave one class about how we cannot question God, that whatever God does is good. You know, it may not seem good at the time. It may seem just the opposite. It may seem bad. It may seem counterproductive. It may seem evil. But yet, but we can't question that God who made the tiger, folks, and what hammer and what chain in what furnace of thy brain, what deadly grasp thy terrors clasp, and when their heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet. God is the one who he made the flower, the delicate, sweet, short-lasting flower, but he also made the 500-pound Bengali tiger, full of muscle, with steak knives for teeth, and switchblades for claws. With one swipe of his claw, he can tear your whole throat out. So that God, we don't question. So I gave a talk about how nothing happens to us without, God doesn't necessarily approve it, God doesn't necessarily sanction it, but there are things that God allows that we're not going to understand. You know, God's world is the world that ought to be. And this world is not the world that ought to be. How many times do we hear, oh, it ought to have been this way, or it should have been this way? That only happens in the spiritual world. This is a broken world. This is a broken world. And we have to understand that a lot of things that happen in this world are not God's best plan for us. We've gone rogue. You know, we've ignored, we've strayed from the protection of God's advice, God's plan for our life. And we've wanted to do it ourselves. We didn't want the light of God's guidance. We didn't want to stick close to him. We didn't want to do what he wanted for us. We wanted something separate. So a lot of the reactions that we get are allowed by God, but they're not God's preferred outcome for us. So anyway, I gave this talk about the sovereignty of God and how we really shouldn't question him, but we should learn to trust him. So there had been an incident where a young girl from Australia went to Vrindavan. Vrindavan is the holy place of the Lord. And everything in Vrindavan is supposed to be Hare Krishna and sweet love and Krishna prem. Well, some or other, a local Vrindavan person, and normally we glorify anyone who took birth in Vrindavan for no better reason than that they were born and raised in Vrindavan. We call them Brijbasis, and we think of them as sacred. We think that no one can take birth in Vrindavan unless they were a great devotee in their past life. Well, as the case may be, one young man got an obsession and began stalking this Australian girl. She couldn't get rid of him. Finally, it came to the point that he forced his way into her room and he shot her and he killed her. And a lot of these young second, third generation Australian youth had known her and loved her, and she was apparently the best of them. I didn't have the privilege of knowing her, but she was apparently the best of them. And this is something that they had been struggling with. And when I gave a talk about the sovereignty of God and how we shouldn't question everything, they came up to me almost as a delegation and said, how can you say such a thing? How can you say that nothing happens without the sanction of God? What was right about this young girl who was a very serious devotee getting gunned down unfairly in the holy place by a Brijbasi? What is the meaning of that true? Well, I said, I wasn't, my lecture, the theme of my lecture was not about how we're privy to the inner meaning, the deepest secrets of everything that happens. Most of what happens, even the things that we think we understand, we actually don't understand them. We don't actually understand the whys and wherefores. We just think we do. Most of what happens to us, we don't understand. So I don't know why that happened. I don't know what good outcome. If I did, I would be God. I would be Krishna. I'm not God, but I do know one thing. Make that two things. I know he's sovereign, and I know that he's not obliged to reveal everything to us, why he allows this, that, and the other thing. And I also know that our only course of action is to trust him. So we can't demand to understand everything that happens, especially in this material world. There's God's will, there's God's best will for us. There's our waywardness, our rebellious attitude. There's the fact that we contravene God's best plan for us almost every moment of every day, and that makes us responsible for the consequences of our actions. What goes around comes around. When you're not serving God, you're outside of God's circle of protection. If you want God's protection, you have to serve him. Now, Caru, this girl was serving God. She was, as far as we could tell, the best of us. I don't know. But I know this. He made the tiger. He put the sun in the sky. He created the oceans. He created the mountains. He put the breath of life in us. And I know also that nobody dies. Nobody dies. He created us eternal. He loved us so much that in the very manner of our creation, he blessed us in such a way that we could never be unfortunate. We could never really be killed. We can never really be betrayed, which reminds me of one of my poems. The inner soul continues when the outer body ends, like flame from wood, sparks ascending, transcending dark matter, blending with the sky, invisible to the naked eye. You cannot kill, nor can you die. You cannot burn, nor can you fry. The soul cannot be scorched by any blaze. No water can drown the spirit. No wind can make it fade. You cannot cut another, nor can you bleed. The soul is eternal, unborn, a seed, indivisible, indestructible, forever free from birth, death, old age, and disease. Yet howsoever turned or tossed, the soul itself can never exhaust. Seed in the heart, beating strong power in everyone. The soul's superior force lives on and runs its endless course in God's unlimited universe. Anyway, I hope you get the point. I hope I made myself clear, because God will not make himself clear. He's not obliged to. And honestly, that's part of the mystery, part of the fun of being a devotee. Krishna acts in mysterious ways as wonders to perform. He said, Krishna's ways may twist and turn, my heart may throb and ache, but my soul is no concern because he makes no mistake. Granted, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling, some of the things that happen in this material world. They're so evil, they're so distasteful. But don't forget, these are men getting the reactions of their self-centered, greedy, lusty actions, which had nothing to do with serving and honoring God and respecting all of his parts and parcels. And so, because there's such egregious behavior, misbehavior in the world, especially in this Kali Yuga age, there are going to be reactions, atrocities, crimes performed that have never been performed before in the history of the world. And rather than try to understand them, which would also make you crazy, which would make you as demented, if you understood why demented people acted the way they act, then perhaps you would become demented too. So let's not pray to understand the behaviors, the abnormal behaviors in this Kali Yuga age. Let's pray, Lord, I don't want to understand. Please don't give me any understanding. Don't give me insight into the minds of madmen, but give me trust in you and faith that everything will turn out all right. And we also have to do our part. Krishna's not going to do for us what we should be doing for ourselves. We have to bring our life back into alignment with God by chanting his holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Purna Sudha Vidman Bina Bhamamani. Name of Krishna is like Chintamani. It will transform your life, so to speak, from iron to gold. Just like in alchemy, you repetitively perform a procedure, and in due course of time, the result is that the iron transforms into gold. Similarly, the iron-like heart, tadashma saram ridyam batiri yadgunamano navirikara netre jadam gaturuashu arsam. At first, it's hard to taste the nectar of the chanting of the holy names because our hearts have become inured. They become hardened. They become attuned to material, gross, animalistic pleasures and stimulation. But as we chant, in due course of time, the heart melts like butter. And tears come from the eyes. The body erupts in goosebumps. The hair stands on ends. And one comes to see the presence of the Lord seated in one's own heart. And eventually, in the advanced stage, devotees even talk to the Lord. Pasyanti te ruchani ambashava prashana bhaktarani achi rupani dipyani vara sakam vijaro krita punya punjam. Says those who are in advanced stage of devotional service, they see the Lord sitting on the lotus flower of their hearts. They see him in the Shama Sundar, the color of monsoon cloud during the rainy season, with a dhoti, which is yellow like lightning, the kastuba jewel on his chest, and the garland, the Janti garland around his neck, the peacock feather. And they see him. They see his lotus eyes. Pritaya tam kala pare purina mandam jashara mohanam imere. And seeing Krishna, there is nothing else that needs to be seen. Never having come into the darshan of Krishna, ever has a soul, having seen Krishna, never ever have the eyes then hankered after or wandered to some other than Krishna subject matter. Just consider, let's imagine let's imagine a beautiful, beautiful, celebrated, famous woman, young woman. I don't know. What's the name of the one that's all the rage now? I don't think it's Britney Spears. There's a Beyonce. There's someone now that's doing concert tours that are just like mega, never in the history of the world have so many people gone to see this female singer. I don't know. I can't think of her name right now, but let's say she walked in the door. So you might appreciate her lips. But after a few seconds of looking at her lips, then you're curious, well, my gaze should now take in her eyes. And then after a few seconds, your restless eyes go to her cheeks or her forehead or the silky cascading hair, or the nice way her shoulders are set, or she might have a biceps, or there's so many different elements, and the eyes are going to wander from one to another. It's not that falling upon her chin, for instance, one drowns in that. It's not that one loses oneself in the meditation of her chin. You quickly become dissatisfied. You want to go plumb in one. And, these beauties, celebrated beauties, more often than not, they get married and remarried 5 or 6 times. What does that tell you? That the partners, the celebrated movie star male and the celebrated movie star female, after living together intimately for a few months, just get sick of each other. But the greatest beauty of this material world is not satisfying. And yet, nowhere, never in history has anybody whose eyes have fallen, any especially fortunate advanced devotees' eyes have fallen in Krishna, the eyes lose their restlessness. If you were to just say hypothetically, get the darshan of Krishna, and your eyes were first of all to fall in the lobe of his ear, you could look at that eternally without getting bored, without being restless. Everything that occupies our interest, our curiosity, our wonder in this material world, whatever it may be, and there's so much out there, originates in Krishna. When you see Krishna, what else could you possibly want to see? I'll even take that further. Whenever you see any part of Krishna's body, you can lose yourself in that eternally. It's not that you wouldn't be interested in seeing other parts of Krishna's body, but each part is so dynamic, is so alive, that you can preoccupy yourself with his toe, with his earlobe, with his chin, with one eyebrow forever. This is Krishna, the supreme personality of God, not even Vishnu, not Shiva. They're 98%, 99% God. But Krishna has beauty, which is incomparable, which is unimaginable even by Vishnu. Yanmarta lila payakam shoyagam maya dasham balam darshanam bihim kritam vishambhakavam shaja param param bhushana bhushanagaram. He is the jewel of all jewels. He is param param. He is the most perfect of all perfect beings. When Krishna descended in his original 2-armed form as the friend of Arjuna to the planet 5,000 years ago, even Vishnu, even Narayan was hankering after seeing Krishna. To that end, he stole the sons of the Brahman just so that Krishna would, in pursuing the sons of the Brahman, retrieving them for the Brahman, that Krishna would come before him. Yanmarta lila payakam shoyagam. Krishna is the beacon. Krishna is the standard. Krishna is the supreme amongst all wealthy, all beautiful, all powerful lords, even including Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, what to speak of Lord Brahma. Here is a quote that when Akrura was sent by Kamsa to bring Krishna to Mathura. Akrura is a devotee. He wants the best for Krishna. He doesn't want any harm to come to Krishna. So being asked by Kamsa to go in a chariot and fetch Krishna was not to the liking of Akrura. And Kamsa is very clever. Among other things, he's a diplomat. So he knew that if he sent Krishna's uncle, Akrura, to request him to come to Mathura, Krishna couldn't refuse. Krishna observes all the etiquette scrupulously, and Krishna would never refuse a request from his elder uncle. And Kamsa knew that. And plus, Akrura is a devotee. Krishna, Aham Bhakta Padan, Krishna says, I don't have any independence. I do whatever my devotees want me to do. These were the reasons behind Kamsa sending Akrura of all people. And Akrura found the task distasteful, but then he thought, Krishna can take care of himself. Kamsa is not going to kill Krishna any more than a firefly is going to eclipse the power of the sun. So he was okay with that. He thought about it a little bit and he was okay with that. And he thought, and above and beyond that, what a great opportunity for me to get out from underneath Kamsa's influence for a few days, to go off and visit Vrindavan and Krishna and the gopis, taste the unlimited prema, which is everywhere present in Vrindavan. So all things considered, Akrura thought it wasn't such a bad deal. And he went and he bowed down, and Krishna bowed down before him also as the elder uncle. And this is what Kamsa said when he came into the presence of Krishna in Vrindavan. Adbhutani yavanti bhuma vyati bhaijale trai vishadakayatani kimme drishtidham vipashataha. Akrura said, Krishna, every wonderful thing that's spread throughout this material world. We talk extensively about Trikuta mountain, mountains made of silver, iron, and gold, the base of which is washed by the ocean of milk. And when the ocean of milk washes the bases of the mountain, there are beautiful emeralds, green emeralds which are created. There are all kinds of beautiful trees and fruits and flowers that inhabit the area. There are demigods, siddhas, charanas, apsaras, and gandharvas who sing and dance and recite verses very, very beautifully. It's a completely intoxicating, heavenly atmosphere. And yet Akrura says, whatever wonderful things the earth, sky, or water contain, they all exist within you. Since you encompass everything, when I am seeing you, what have I not seen? Seeing Krishna, one basically loses interest in vacationing, in sojourning, in Caribbean cruises and princess cruises and Apple vacations and all-inclusive resorts in Cancun and Acapulco and Yucatan and Haiti and Dominican Republic and Costa Rica. One loses all of one's attraction for these, having seen Krishna with eyes of love and devotion. Krishna himself explains in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Maya dakshena prakriti suyatesa hetananina jagadvipati. My akshena, Maya dakshena, refers to eyes. Yanere bin daksha. Aksha, daksha means eyes. And Maya dakshena prakriti means that Krishna is he whose eyes are above this material world. One who directs everything, creates everything, designs everything, and who directs everything from above, from a position of transcendence. Uttama Shoka, one who is above the transitional, changing temporality of this material world. One who directs, creates, and maintains and destroys everything with the eyes of eternity. From a point of view of physics, Krishna is creating this world. From a point of view of physics, Krishna is the origin of the world. And from a biological point of view, he's creating all the 8,400,000 species of life, which are spread throughout all the material and spiritual world. In other words, Krishna is everything. Narayana paro sarve, Narayana paro jatya, Narayana param gada, Narayana param jata, yashtu Narayan Brahma Rudra Shamadvena Vishata. Narayan is everything. Narayan is the sun. Narayan is the moon. Narayan is the star. And Krishna is the source of Narayan. Ete Kamsha Kalopam Sham Krishna Stu Bhagavan Shvaya. Akrura says quite appropriately, having seen you, my eyes are feasting on you. My eyes are swimming. My eyes have lost themselves in the enchantment of your unlimited transcendental form. So what interest could I possibly have in seeing the other phenomenon of this material world? I was on my treadmill this morning chanting, and the software took me to Tahiti, extensive long beach in Tahiti, beautiful. The color of the ocean is an azure, beautiful color, the sand, the palm trees. You can, see the people vacationing, lounging in their beach chairs and dipping in the water. None of this is attractive. As attractive as it is, not that this isn't attractive, it's coming from the Lord. So having the Lord as its origin, the Lord is the most attractive, the all attractive. That's the very reason why we're distracted by this material world. That's the reason we forget Krishna. Tatramayo vinima tricharga vinamisham. In the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says this material world is so enchanting. Why? Because it comes from the supreme enchanter Krishna, that even great sages and demigods can't sort it out. They can't totally find the line of separation between illusion and reality. The illusion itself is so attractive by virtue of the fact that it comes from Krishna. Devi Hishugunuim, Devi He. This material world, sometimes we give it a bad rap. It's temporary, it's dark, it's full of ignorance. It's not going to satisfy your desires. And all of that's true. But at the same time, it resembles the spiritual world. And it is actually divine. It's not the higher internal divine spiritual energy of the Lord, but it is divine by virtue of the fact that it comes from the Lord. This environment in which Gajendra gets himself in trouble is just a amsa, just a tiny, tiny, insignificant spark of Krishna's glory, Krishna's majesty. There's more on this topic, which we can save for tomorrow. It's 12 minutes past 8, so perhaps we can conclude our discussion here for this Transcendental Tuesday. We have here Brent, Spencer, Chad Willwright, in order of appearance, you might say, Sundari Priya, Carmen, Vaibhavi, Govinda Dev, Shali, Bhakti Gary, Britta, Taylor Swift, that's it, thank you, unmarried. He mentions that she's unmarried. Taylor Swift, thank you. Yes, that's the person that everybody is. She's taking the world by storm. So here's Carmen. She has some good poetry, very sophisticated stuff here. God's will doesn't will, it allows free will to fulfill in an illusion that's a fusion of God's many forms, names, and norms. I always have to read her 2 or 3 times. It's deep. God's will doesn't will. It okay, I got it. Okay, exactly. God's will doesn't will. It allows free will to fulfill. In other words, God gives us the independence to make mistakes. And when we act independently, misusing our free will, and we get a reaction from that, we can't then blame God. If we had heeded God's advice in the form of scripture and great sage in the first place, we wouldn't be facing this negative reaction. So if you choose to separate yourself from the shelter of God's light, God's direction, God's love, and then when you get a reaction, then don't blame God. That's what she's saying. God's will doesn't will. It allows free will to fulfill an illusion that's a fusion of God's many name, forms, and norms. Yeah, we get tangled in the illusory energy of the Lord, which is coming from the Lord. It's very absorbing. It draws you in, sucks you in. It's entangling. That's the nature of this material world. So Krishna consciousness, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare, is the process of disentangling yourself from the material world and entangling yourself with Krishna. Unfortunately, they're not separate processes. It's not that you have to first disentangle yourself and then entangle yourself to Krishna. The more you become attached to Krishna, the more you become disentangled from material nature. So doing the one thing, the other is accomplished. Bhakti panishnava varaktana chita trishoka eko shutakara prapadyamana yatana tushti pushti shurapyanashana. This example is given from the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, that when you may be hungry, and because of your hunger, you're disoriented, you're miserable, you're weakened, but with every bite you take, you enjoy the flavor, you enjoy the nourishment, you enjoy the taste of the food, and you don't have to make any separate endeavor to get rid of your hunger, to get rid of your weakness, to get rid of your vertigo. The eating of the food, mouthful by mouthful, accomplishes the purpose of getting rid of the weakness, the misery, and the dizziness. The one thing accomplishes both purposes. So similarly, advancing, getting a taste for serving the Lord amongst the devotees and under the direction of the pure devotees of the Lord is in itself all that's needed. Every other good purpose will be achieved as long as one moves forward constantly and consistently in terms of one's attachment to serving the Lord in love and devotion. So thank you. There are very deep verses there, Carmen, as always. Govinda Dev says here, thanks so much, Drew. Exactly what I need to hear this morning. Basking in your nectarine words, illuminating the greatness of God. Govinda Dev is always very kind and generous himself, a colossus. Last but not at all least, in fact, that which we all look forward to with eager, keen anticipation, as Rob's bringing everything to a wrap with his own takeaways. To you, Rob.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for the class. So here's what I got. It's for our good to do what we should. The family that serves together stays together.
True. Mm-hmm.
Even when it seems like a bust, don't fuss, just trust. To stay sane, chant God's name.
Absolutely.
No matter how we try, the material will never satisfy. Turn to Krishna for a spiritual high.
Nice.
And lose yourself in Krishna's lotus feet. Nothing in this world could be so sweet.
Nice, nice. Krishna Govinda, son of Nanda, you're the one, second to none, my shining sun. I'm heartbroken in the ocean of birth and death. It's not worth the commotion. Pull me out of this cruel blender, surrenders an atom at your sweet, tender lotus feet. Reminds me of that. Please do send those to me. A suitable, fitting end to a wonderfully stimulating discussion. Thanks very much for jumping in. I know that you all are responsible family members and parents and employees and employers. And I'm so grateful that you take the time out of your schedule, especially early in the morning day, to set the tone of your day with some thoughts about Krishna and his unlimited glories. I feel humbled and honored. See you tomorrow. In the meantime, let's all say it together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.